Do you find workouts more challenging in your 40s? Then stick around. We may have something for you. Hey, I'm Mike,
I'm doing.
and welcome to another episode of 40 Plus Fit, the podcast that goes behind the fads and delves into the science behind sustainable weight loss and fitness for the 40 plus crowd, where we bring you expert insights on exercise, nutrition, and healthy habits, empowering you to make informed choices and create a personalized plan for success. Because after all, life after 40 is just getting started.
That's right. Especially as I'm approaching 40. In still it's still a while more, but I have to prepare myself, right?
That's right. You know, as I
And then
usually
what
say,
what do I have to look forward to, Mike?
what do you have to look forward to? How much time do you have?
I have 5 years, I think. I have 4 years. I think this year I'm 36. Wow.
Well, time's climbing, eh?
It is. It's creeping
Not
up on
the,
us.
the spring chicken anymore, like when we first met.
Yeah, I still feel spring chickeny. Um, yeah, but definitely age is catching up, right? Like there's many things that come with getting older and then being in this game long enough that we start to notice, especially things like, not feeling as like we can get away with doing stupid stuff in the gym as like when we were younger. I can't just go in and wing it. I got to make sure I have a program. I got to make sure I have something that I can follow and progressively, overload and yeah, and then make sure I actually focus on my recovery and stuff. Otherwise, I guess get all these aches and pains and things just creeping up much faster than they need to.
That's true. That's true. I can attest to all of that, and I can give you some more things to look forward to as as you approach this beautiful
What's that
age
list?
age of 40.
Yeah.
I mean, there's this thing that's we've spoken about this extensively on the podcast. Is the concept of sarcopenia,
Yeah.
the decreased muscle mass,
Muscle mass. Yeah.
and all of this. So like when you're in your 20s or when you're just starting out in that time, you hit the gym, it's like, wow, everything's just optimized for workouts. And so you really just go crazy. And then, wow, 5 workouts in the gym, you have a bicep already. You got something to show. But as you get older, it's like you find that with the decreased muscle mass, and it comes into play, like lifting the kind of weights that you lifted when you were younger, not quite the same kind of amount. I mean, yes, you can probably work your way back up there,
Yep.
but coming back into it, yeah, you really have to rethink your starting points when you
Yeah.
come back
Especially,
into
as
to
I
workout.
imagine, especially as if you've taken a big chunk of time away, right? So for you, you're playing rugby and stuff way when you're younger. And then you took like what almost a 10-year break. How long was that for you before you
Yeah, it was
started?
probably about 10, 10, 12 years. Yeah.
Yeah,
So coming back was a bit of an eye opener for me. you,
sure, for sure.
you come in, you do a bench press, you do a squat. It's like, oh, this is not the weight that I'm used to.
And so speaking of like going back into it, what else did you notice when you first started trying to work out again?
Right. So another one is also as but to be fair, this is something that I was never there really that great on, but it was worse when I came back. I
Hmm.
had a reduced flexibility.
Okay.
So like trying to do a because I had also in that period I'd moved from Europe, I'd moved to Asia. And so for those that are not familiar with it, in Asia, they have this beautiful concept called a squat toilet. And what that basically is, it's just a hole in the ground that you can go do your number two in. So for somebody who cannot squat and does not have the flexibility to squat, this was a nightmare. The amount of stress that you go through every time you need the toilet in the public and you have to go and you have to look, but it's like pray to God. If you're not a religious person, you become a religious person praying for a toilet to be available, one that you can actually sit on.
Yeah, I
So,
mean that's like a basic functionality thing, right?
yes.
Yeah.
So basically, from that is like I realized, if I want to continue to live in Asia from a practical perspective, not just from a workout perspective, but from a practical perspective, I needed to increase the flexibility. And so that's another thing that I needed to focus on. Um, Another one that also comes into play. This one I personally haven't experienced that much, but people that I know have is balance issues.
Yep, yep.
You know, as you get older, your balance is not quite what it used to be. And so this is also something you need to take into account as you work out, put your workout plans together, or whichever workout that you want to do. And then
Yeah.
the last one that I'll probably say is, and this one is quite relevant quite often, is joint pain. Like nowadays, when I was younger, I still remember a friend of mine and we decided on a Monday that Saturday we were going to go run a half marathon. And so we signed up on the Monday. This is like no training, no nothing. We just like, yeah, let's just do it. And I was like, okay. And we
Yeah.
signed up and off we went on the Saturday when we ran this half marathon. These days, I have to actually struggle to finish a 5 km. And then after the 5 km, I have to come back and it's like, oh, my ankles, oh, my knees, oh, my this, and all these kind of things. So joint pain has also become a bit of an issue
For sure, for
and
sure.
something for you to look forward to. But I mean,
Would you say that a large part of that also is just the fact that you weren't very active for a long period of time?
I think it could be, but
Okay.
I'm not sure if it's the only reason.
Yeah, no,
It
I
could
don't know,
be an
definitely.
added thing to it, or
But I think
contributing factor. But
yeah.
for me, I find it's more like age has the larger contributing factor,
Mm,
because of age, as in things that are depleting as you get older, if I can put it that way.
yeah. Well, age, I mean, if you look at it from the physiological point of view, right? Age is just your body's the rate at which your body is replacing its cells or rebuilding itself versus how much is being destroyed or torn down day to day. That rate of replacement is getting lower and lower. That's what aging essentially is, right?
Mm.
It's either matching. So when we are younger, like our build up rate, the protein synthesis rate will be like way, way, way high. And then our protein degradation rate will be super low. And then that levels slowly, 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 level out until they both meet each other somewhere around I guess our 30s or 35, so which is where I'm at right now. And
Somewhere where
then
you
once
are.
you start to go past that, it starts to go the opposite direction where your body breaks down a lot faster than it rebuilds up. So I think a large part of that is like if we let nature take its course and we don't do anything to prevent that, then that rate just, goes off exponentially, I suppose, or at a really much faster rate. And that's where the aging component really comes in.
I mean, it's quite similar to, when you have a car and you live by the seaside. If you just have the car and you just drive the car every day, but you don't maintain it, you don't put wax, you don't
Uh,
put all these different things, the car will slowly start building up some rust from the
yep.
seawater and everything that comes in. And from there, you'll see it start degrading. And after a while, I mean, a
Mm,
long period, you won't have a car left.
yeah.
And so for me, is I look at aging as the same kind of way, is that if you do that and you just continue living and you're saying it's like not really doing anything, but just
Yep.
letting age take its process, it's the same kind of thing as the rust creeping in
Yep.
and slowly eating away. But I see it as like we do have things to try and counter certain parts of it.
Yeah.
And I'm sure you
Oh.
you deal with a lot of your clients in these kind of aspects too.
Yeah, I mean, there are definitely lots of modifications to the way we approach training people that are just getting back into it, which tends to be a lot of older folk. They are 40 plus. So a large portion of our clientele is in that mature, distinguished. I like to say the distinguished crowd, right? So you've
Thanks.
got all
Thanks.
this wisdom, all these experience behind you, but we need to get the physical to match up with the mental, so to speak. The good thing is, unlike a car, the body is adaptable, and if you give it the right instruction, it actually gets stronger and adapts up to what you give it. Versus like a car is static, right? Like you have to actually maintain it and then maybe even replace a part here and there, whatever. Um, so there are lots of modifications we can do to the workouts, in that sense. What's the first thing that Mike, you would say is your biggest lesson with getting older and getting back into the gym, especially after the first time you did
The
it?
very first thing is that I need to leave my ego at the door. That was the
Mm,
very first thing. But the second one that I would say is probably plays in a more important role is because it goes over various days, is rest and recovery.
Okay. The the rest and recovery component is really, really important, right? Because at the end of the day, we can't go in there and like smash weights in like we talked about in the beginning.
Yeah.
Same way we did when we were 20. So listening to the body is one thing, right? Adapting the workouts accordingly is another. But I think that is a very almost ambiguous instruction. Like what exactly does listening to the body mean? You know? So I think from that perspective, a perfect example would be like clients that start workouts for the first time, especially after not training or not exercising for very long, they often experience really intense soreness. And it tends to correlate very strongly with how intense the workout, was that they did. Now, some people use that as a sign of like, oh, I did a really good workout. And that's a totally different thing we can talk about at a different time where, it's not exactly correlated in that sense. But usually when you get really, really sore, it's an indication to your body that whatever you did was way higher than what your body's generally used to. So it's so different from what your body's used to that the stimulus is so novel and so new, it creates this level of soreness as a byproduct as well. Now, in order to make progression, in order to get the body to adapt, we don't need this level of soreness.
I was just going to ask, what's the difference between is DOMS, right? Basically,
Yes.
so what's the difference between
Concept.
DOMS and like when is DOMS a good thing and when is it not a good thing?
Yeah. So I think the first thing is DOMS, like delayed onset muscle soreness itself, again, it lies on the spectrum. Okay. And it comes as a byproduct of working hard, but it's not the end goal of working hard. Like you don't work out to feel sore.
Yeah.
Although some people have the mentality because ingrained in this, right? Like if we can feel it tangibly, then it means I did something.
Yeah. If I can walk away comfortably, it means I did not do a good
It means I
leg
did not
workout.
train hard enough. Yeah. But the truth is that your body doesn't grow from just one workout or two workouts, right? It grows from that consistent exposure over a long period of time.
Hmm.
And so this idea of like the DOMS and the soreness, again, lying on this spectrum is that generally you should be able to, you should get some DOMS. Okay. If you don't get any, it's not the end of the world. Look at your workout. Like, did you progress from the previous workout? Look at the numbers. Were you lifting more? Was the technique the same? Things like this. We can fine tune some of those qualitative factors. But if you don't get any DOMs, I think I want to put it out there that it doesn't mean that your workout was wasted. Okay. But back to the DOMs issue here. When is it like a good thing or a bad thing? I would say it's honestly a bad thing if it really impedes your day-to-day life, your functionality.
Hmm.
So I'm sure you and we've had this experience before where we really smash a intense leg workout. And then a week later, we're still struggling to sit down on the toilet,
Yes.
right?
Guilty as charged.
Yeah. And look, like it doesn't even happen just for like people that are 40 plus. The commonality here is that we take a lot of time away from doing the thing. And then when you come back into it, you come back into it from, as intense as you left off with. And so that difference, that depth of difference, right, between what your body's used to and what you're giving it at the moment is just so huge. And when it's so huge, it's going to create like super intense DOMs. And that's usually what makes it very difficult for people to continue with their workouts.
Hmm.
Yeah, because
But
you're feeling
it's
super
not just the
sore.
workouts though, right? This also affects then your NEAT, your non-exercise activity.
Exactly. Yeah. So it affects your day-to-day functionality. Like you're not going to want to walk around if your quads and your hamstrings are so sore you can like they're tender to the touch.
Yeah.
If you hit that point, then on that spectrum of like really intense DOMs and it being an issue, you've really hit pretty much the end of that spectrum already. And
Yeah.
then yeah, but if you don't get any DOMs all the time, like consistently you're not sore at all, you might not be working hard enough. So again, it's never quite clear, like in the sense of you can tell a person directly, oh, if you don't get sore, means that you're not getting any results. Like it's not so direct. Unfortunately, I know everybody wants to have that answer where it's like, oh, if I get sore, it means that I worked hard. But soreness has many degrees, right? And
Yeah.
for us, like for me right now, I'm training. I'm trying to pull on muscle, so my volume is quite high. I'm actually perpetually sore. But it's a level of soreness that I'm actually quite comfortable with, and I know I get recovered enough for my next training session that I can push. So I'm never quite fully like sore free,
Hmm.
but you reach a level where it's okay. you know, and I know I can still recover because other metrics I'm tracking allow me to recover from it.
Okay. So what would your advice then be for somebody who is actually getting back into it? Taking all of this conversation that we just had into account.
I think the biggest factor is gradual progression, to be honest. Meeting yourself where you're at. Because if you haven't, and I think we've talked about this in previous episodes before, so hint, please go and watch or listen to those other episodes. But when you're just starting out and you'll be sitting on a couch, you haven't been doing any other kind of exercise, right? Sitting in front of your computer, doing your work, and then going to the couch at the end of the day kind of deal. You can't just like straight away jump into running 5 kilometers a day.
Yeah.
You know, you have to work your progression up. If you're not even active in the first place, you're clocking like 1,000 steps a day. Try to bump it up to maybe 5,000 steps. Like if you want something really manageable, like 5,000 steps, I think that is a big enough difference that it will make a huge impact on just your overall well-being. Not even just the weight, you know, fat loss and all that, but just overall well-being. But it's also not so difficult that most people can't do it, right? Like 1,000 steps to 5,000 steps, you'll be surprised just how much you can clock just by getting up from your desk every hour for 5 minutes. You know, by taking the stairs a bit more. Just by keeping an eye on your step count, you know, walking a slight detour before you reach back home. All these things will add up. Yeah. So that'll be the first thing, like gradually progress yourself. So when you go into it, especially with weights, probably the first week, I would say you want to make sure you are focusing purely on technique. Okay. And then use a weight that feels like a good enough challenge. But by the end of the set, you're not looking like you're going to die, you know, you're not out of breath, you're not gassed. Yeah.
Yeah.
Just go to a level where, let's say if 10, you know, 1 to 10, 10 is like you're lying on the ground, you're dead, you cannot do another single rep. And then 1 is like you could go on for, you feel like you could go on forever. You barely just started, right?
Yeah.
You probably want to be around a 5 or 6 just for
Okay.
that first week. Just for the first week. And then you use that first week to set a benchmark. And the next week you say, okay, let me see if I can go heavier. You know, you load up the weight and then you gradually progress from there. So use like
But
always
that jump is not like a jump from a 5 to a 9, right? It's like a 5 to a 6 and a 6 to a
yeah.
7.
Yeah, like 5 to a 6, 6 to a 7. Because the thing is, especially when you're just starting back out again, your progress is going to be really quick. Like you're going to gain strength really quickly the moment you really get the hang of the movements. And the large reason for that is because at the start, you're not practiced in the movement. So there's two components to the strength, which is you're familiar with the movement and you can access, I would say, this is a very not the best, it's a very crude way of describing it, but you can access all the muscle fibers to lift all the weights kind of thing. So at the beginning, you can access maybe 10% of the muscle fibers. Again, this is super arbitrary in numbers here. But the idea is you don't have the awareness of how to do the movement so well that you can do it efficiently, right? So even a lighter weight will generally feel, you know, like it's tough. But as you get better at the movement, you access more of these muscle fibers in the sense that you get better at the skill of strength. So you're able to lift things more efficiently, even though you might not have gained any muscle. So that's the mental.
But you're activating the muscle.
But in a way, you're activating
Yeah.
more muscle fibers because you're able to get better at movement. And then once you reach that threshold point where you are really good at movement, you can start to increase the weights, you know, and that would then have a more meaningful effect on your actual increase in muscle mass. Yeah. So in this initial runway where people are just starting out, the increases from week to week can be quite aggressive. I've trained clients where like they start off, you know, deadlift for the first time on the, let's say like trap bar deadlift, you know, get them to do like something like 60 kilos. Okay. You know, pretty cool. The next week we can go up to 70, 80 kilos sometimes, just from making sure that the movement is more well refined. And then maybe even the week after that, maybe 90 kilos. The week after that, maybe 100 kilos. You're talking like almost 10 kilo jumps.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Crazy.
So I've seen that happen, but a lot of this is not because they're like getting a lot more muscle per se. Sometimes they lose a bit of fat in the process, in the diet, everything's in order. So you see a lot more definition coming in, you know, and then you start to think like, oh man, I'm gaining some muscle and stuff. But it's probably not, you know, it's like your existing muscles are probably getting filled up with retaining a bit more water, you know, a bit of the inflammatory response. You're losing some fat so you can see more definition. So all these kind of cool stuff that's happening at the beginning. Yeah. So yeah, so to go back to it again, start gradually and progressively establish that first benchmark and then try to make your leaps from there, according to how you feel. But use that exertion meter that I just mentioned, right? 1 to 10, like a 5 to 6, start off there, and then slowly bring it up every session.
Okay. So when you're talking about listening to your body as well, that's obviously not just pertaining to muscles, right? But it's also pertaining to, like I mentioned earlier, joint pain.
Yep, 100%. 100%. So if you are finding that a lot of the joint pain that you're experiencing comes, for example, after exercise. So immediately after exercise, then clearly the exercise is aggravating it to some degree, right? So you want to switch that out. So example of this would be a lot of people thinking, okay, I need to run to get my cardio in to help with the weight loss as well, which is great. Like if you want to get more activity in and to clock more steps, you want to go running, totally fine. But if when you run, you're pounding the pavement, right? You're striding, the way you're doing it is just like so intensive on your joints. And your techniques is not great. You might want to choose low joint impact movements. So things, for example, where either riding a bike in the gym, the stationary bike, using the elliptical in the gym, these are my two favorite options for people, just because it's not as joint intensive as something like running. Then when you're training with weights and stuff, assuming they're doing good technique and all, you probably will not have any joint pain. If you have existing joint pain and you do an exercise and it hurts, right? It hurts and it gets worse, that exercise is aggravating your joint pain. But otherwise, if you're doing an exercise and maybe you get a bit of clicking, or maybe you have some level of discomfort, but as you do the exercise, the level of discomfort stays about the same. Maybe sometimes it might even decrease, right? As you get more blood and more blood flow into the area and muscles get warmed up. If that's happening, then lifting weights is totally fine. Like the exercise is still totally fine. In fact, if anything, it's likely that exercise is going to help you get rid of the joint pain in the future.
So you mentioned the clicking. Like
Yep.
I know some people like when they do bicep curls,
Yes.
then the elbow will actually click.
Yeah. So like the clicking, as long as there's no pain associated with it, there's a lot of new research and literature that's come out that actually not even new. I think as long ago as like the early 2000s, early 1990s, they already found that as long as there's no pain, there's no correlated issues with any clicking sounds. So it doesn't directly lead to like wear and tear in the elbow or anything. It's easy to draw that correlation, I think. And I've seen where there are some practitioners where they, tell people, oh, if you're just clicking, you have to solve this issue and stuff. But to be honest, if it's not bothering you, you don't have to really worry about it. Like I can make my ankle in a very weird way. I can rotate in a weird way and create this like clicking sound, but I have no issues. I have no pain in my ankle at all.
Oh yeah, I have the clicks every time I get out of bed to go to the toilet. It's like click, click, click all the way.
Yeah. And sometimes there's also a difference between like clicking. Example, like when you there's some areas of my body, like you rotate the joints and I get a little bit of that little clicky feel or sound. And it feels weird. I get it feels weird. But as long as there's no pain, that's totally fine. Yeah. But there's also a differentiation between that and the popping between the joints.
Yeah.
Basically, if you go to a chiropractor, you get like, you rotate you, they crack your neck, all this sort of stuff. All these things, all this cracking is essentially just synovial fluid bubble popping, which doesn't do anything, to be honest. I mean, it feels good. Don't
Yeah.
get me wrong, it feels good in the immediate term, but in terms of long-term impact, actually it doesn't really do anything.
Okay. So if I let's go back to the bicep curl.
Yeah.
I get the clicking, but I do
Yep.
get pain.
Yes.
Okay. So what would be my next steps there?
Oh, for something like this, then number one, stop doing the bicep curl in that way. Probably I'll look at the technique, the way that it's being done. I'll look at the angle in which the arm is being placed in. It could just be, like some people just have weird angles to the way their body's set up. Maybe you had an injury before and the way it healed weirdly. So the way the force is being loaded, or the way the angle in which the joint is being loaded is just not as well aligned. So there might be a better exercise that you could do. So we'll look at the technique first, and then we'll decide, is it a technique issue? If we can solve that with the technique issue, then we solve it there. If not, we just swap out the exercise. Because there's so many ways to train your biceps anyway. So
Yeah.
you don't have to worry about that. Yeah.
So if I'm a layman who's doing this DIY, if I have pain, it's stop that exercise and either consult a professional or try a different exercise that maybe there's no pain.
Yeah.
Okay.
My recommendation, honestly, and this is off the cuff, right? Like as somebody who's done this for a long time, is this, right? If you're experiencing pain in any exercise and you have been exercising for a long time, so I'm assuming that you have been exercising for a while, chances are, you just need to swap to a different exercise. Okay,
Yeah.
you just need to swap to a different exercise that doesn't aggravate the pain. And then you also need to check your recovery, because a lot of times joint pains, and even injuries, eventually they do lead to injuries and stuff, right? Like all these injuries tend to be a result of poor rest and recovery, not so much an exercise issue. A lot of people blame the exercise. Example, people will say, "Oh, I go and do deadlifts, and I hurt my back, so I'm
Yeah.
very scared of deadlifts now. I can't do heavy deadlifts." But the thing is that, number one, in the first place, doing the heavy deadlift, were they just like loading up way beyond what the technique could hold out with? First of all, and that's usually the case. I've seen that happen many, many, many times with a lot of powerlifting clients that I used to train.
Yeah.
So they always try to do a max out, and it'll be terrible, and when you max out, your technique's going to go to shit. So sure, fine, fair enough. But what happens is that after that, they get some sort of pain. They go through this whole process of like, oh, I got to do this rehab. So they don't do deadlifts at all, right? They go through all these like very light, random rehab exercises, they're told to do, that don't actually translate directly to doing heavy deadlifts anymore. And the only thing they needed to do was just to regulate the load on the deadlifts and get better at deadlifting at perhaps some lighter weights first. So scaling back the ego, scaling back the weights, doing more deadlifts properly with good control, and not maxing out all the time. And then they can actually recover from that, and they won't end up injuring themselves. But most of the time, they do all these other rehab stuff. And when we leave things alone in the body, generally they do self-heal. Like a lot of lower back pain will self-resolve. In fact, like 50% or 60% of lower back pain self-resolves. If you see there was a multi-study analysis being done. And about 50-60% of low back pain self-resolves. So it's like, okay, then they feel better, right? But because they did all these random drills, they kind of correlate that with, oh, this thing that made my back better. So they go back to the deadlift and they just do the same thing again. I just go and max out straight away. And the cycle just repeats itself, right? So yeah, it's really funny when you can see it happening, but if you're in it, I get that it's not so easy to see it. So
That's
yeah.
actually brings up another point. Like in a previous podcast, we spoke about, when you were younger and all those kind of things. Sometimes bad form actually helped develop other parts of your muscles. You gave the
Yeah.
example, I think, for the deadlift where you wasn't such great form, and then it actually helped strengthen other fibers.
Yeah.
Does this still apply for somebody who's over 40 coming back in? Or is it actually, once you're at this stage of your life, it's better to focus on proper form?
That's actually a great question, because I think a lot of times people immediately think, okay, if I'm older, it means that I am less capable, right? My body's less capable in a sense. But to be honest, the rules still apply. Just the degree of which they apply needs a bit more consideration. So again, we go back to the rest and recovery issue. When you're over 40 versus when you're a youngling, right? When you're over 40, you have kids to take care of you. You have family, you have a stressful job, you have all these things that impact your ability to recover. And so when you're younger, you don't have any other obligation. All you can do is live, eat, sleep, go around and make a fool of yourself, right? That's I'm just speaking of my own childhood and teenage years. But yeah, that is pretty much like a total difference in rest and recovery ability. So right now, the recovery ability is probably a bit more compromised. But does that mean that your body will not adapt? No, because at the end of the day, as long as you're doing strength training and you're giving the right stimulus to your body and giving it a chance to recover from that stimulus, that's when you will adapt. And so I've had clients where they had lower back pain from deadlifts. So coming, we teach them how to do what we call a round back deadlift, the way you intentionally round the lower back and hold the weight in the hand. Of course, we start super light, right? We
Yeah.
start obviously unweighted, just to allow them to get used to that motion. And I give them literally like, just a 5 kilo plate to hold, and then they do that. Or kettlebell, you stand on the bench, you just do that. And then every week, we just progress the exercise the same way you would progress any other exercise. And that builds up the spinal erectors really well, gets rid of their lower back pain, allows their spine to now become so flexible in multiple directions, that it just gets rid of the back pain. In fact, I had one client with scoliosis where we did this a lot, and in their after pictures right now, this after many years, yeah, if the after pictures right now after training for a while, their spinal, like the curvature, actually looks way less pronounced
Oh,
compared to when they first started. Of course, this is also in combination with training like the back muscles and everything. Yeah, but not just the spinal erectors itself, but yeah, you can see how just the strength training component and the adaptation can also happen regardless of your age. Because this client was 45 when they came to us. They've been training for like 10 years on their own, on and off, and they always had this back pain issue recurring.
Hmm.
Yeah. And then now at 50, like he's no back pain and he's like, he feels better. He feels more balanced. I think that's the key thing.
Yeah.
Because sometimes when you have scoliosis, you feel very weird, right? You feel very one-sided and it feels off and you're very scared to do anything.
It's interesting how these kind of things work, right? Like when I was younger, we actually had a rugby player who always got hamstring injuries. And
Mm.
so what tends to do is, we'll target the actual hamstring and fix the hamstring, and then the hamstring's healed, and off you go again. And then a few months later, oh, another hamstring injury, and da da da, and so on and so on. And so this particular guy, he changed clubs, and when he went to the other club, they actually investigated a bit further, and they found that there was an imbalance in his back muscles. And because of the imbalance in the back muscles, that was leading to the strain on the hamstring that had to work differently compared to the rest of it. And so they fixed that imbalance on the back muscle. And he actually, I won't say he never got a hamstring injury again, but it was a far less that it happened thereafter.
Yeah, yeah. I think sometimes when we develop like way too asymmetrically, it can become an issue like this. Um, but to be honest, I think most of us are asymmetrical anyway. Like the body's not meant to be symmetrical. If it was, the way our organs were orientated would not be the way they are. Yeah.
Mm.
Um,
I think it's probably good to say though that when we're talking about these kind of things, like you're talking about a rounded back deadlift and all that,
yes.
that it's not advisable for somebody who's just doing DIY to now go and do a rounded back deadlift, right? This should be done with some tutelage, somebody, a professional actually overseeing, somebody who
I
knows what they should be doing rather than just a
like
because
like
rounded back rather
yeah, like
rather than a
like an
purposeful.
like a professional eye on it, right? Just to
Yeah.
make sure you're doing it right. Definitely 100%. Like if you are trying to go about it alone, it is probably not as easy in your later years, just because we cannot be so objective with ourselves to put aside our ego and say, I actually have to start from scratch almost, or what feels like starting from scratch.
Yeah.
And so having somebody there to like point out and keep you from injuring yourself is probably a good idea. That being said, though, I think if you are of sound mind, as some of us might not be, but if look, if you can be very objective with yourself and you know how to start slow and slowly progress up, then I don't see any issue with that. With trying out some of these things, but always again gradual progression. That's what we talked about just now, right?
Yep.
Start lighter than you think you need to, and then slowly progress from there.
Okay. What about warming up and cooling down? Do the rules still apply as they were before, or is there anything different we need to tweak?
I would say with warming up process, just doing a bit more warm-ups will be useful. But here's the thing, a lot of times people think warm-ups mean going on a foam roller, rolling out, or doing a lot of random stretching exercises and stuff.
Yeah.
The best warm-up is this, because warm-ups are generally divided into two parts, because the warm-up is supposed to serve a function. Okay, the function is to warm up your body, literally bring up your body temperature, so the fluid between the joints, all that can flow a little bit better, becomes a bit less viscous. And then the other thing is to neurally prepare you, that means mentally prepare you, in terms of your connection with your muscles, the coordination, ramp up the coordination of your muscles so that you can do the exercise that you need to do. And that's what the warm-up is supposed to do. And so the warm-up actually needs to be, there's two parts to it, as I mentioned. The first one is the general warm-up, and the second one is what we call a specific warm-up. The general warm-up is actually really easy, like really easy. Like for me, right, a general warm-up will be anything that gets your heart rate up, gets you like starting to generate heat and sweat.
Yep.
So for me, walking from here in Singapore's weather over to, right now as I'm recording, I'm in Singapore, right? So if I walk from here over to the gym, that's my warm-up, my first general warm-up. So once I hit the gym, I can really get into my workout. And the first exercise, the specific warm-up, okay, is where I do the thing or something that mimics close enough to the thing that I'm going to be doing. And then I just do much like a lighter weight with that. So for example, if I'm going to the gym, I walk to the gym, I already warmed up from the walk over. I quickly get into my first exercise, let's say it's the bench press. I know I warm up with the bar, I put on a little bit more weight, I warm up with that again, I do more reps with those And so that's literally it. That's the specific warm-up. For somebody that's going to go running, for example, you might just do a even just getting to the run space, right? You might just do a bit of jogging on the spot, just get your core temperature up, things like this. And then you might do some running drills as a specific warm-up. So example, high knees, butt kicks, doing a whole series of drills as a specific warm-up just to neurally get your coordination in place. Then you go and start running. And the thing is, warm-up shouldn't take you that long. If let's say if you want to do a general warm-up in the gym, right? If some people come in, or last time what we would tell clients to do is like, okay, come in, make sure you can start about 5 minutes earlier than when our session actually starts. Get on the treadmill, get on the bike, get on the elliptical, just do 5 minutes of that. And they usually do 5 minutes of that at a certain pacing. That's it. Heart rate comes up, body warms up, joints feel great. Boom, straight into the specific exercise we need to do. And we warm up on those specific exercises already.
Yeah. I think I do the same kind of warm-ups nowadays as well. So my squat, like when people ask me, or actually no, when they ask me, but when they see my recording of it, it's like a squat is like 8 sets. They're like, wow, you can do 8 sets of squats. And I was like, no, not really. I actually have 3 to 4 sets of warm-ups before I go into my actual working set. And then after my working set, then I have my back off sets that I go into. So it's not like I'm just going crazy for 8 sets. And I find that since implementing that, I'm able to go deeper because my body is able to get used to the movement of going up and down in the lighter weights. And then 2, by the time I reach my working set, I'm in the zone and I'm able to actually go for it, rather than when I previously where I do like combination of static and dynamic stretching and all those kind of things. And by the time I get the bar on my back, I almost want to die. It's like, what the heck is this? And so I found that actually, as you stated, that works quite well. What about you? You touched on a few points quickly, but if you could briefly also then just mention when you talk about rest and recovery each time.
Yeah.
I mean, we can always do another podcast on this at a later time where we can delve deeply, but for those that are listening to this particular podcast, what's the advice you would give for those regarding rest and recovery? What should they look out for? What should they actually focus on?
The part about rest and recovery is honestly the most important thing that everybody's lacking right now is sleep. Like, sleep is really the gains killer, or the health killer, if you will, if you don't get enough sleep, a lack of sleep rather. Yeah. So a lack of sleep is something that if you are experiencing that right now in your life, I understand it's difficult. I understand logistically it might not even look, the only exceptions I'll give you is like you have a newborn baby. If you have a newborn baby, yes, then I understand your situation. I have so many friends who now have newborns. They don't get enough sleep. It's part of the process. Sure. But outside of those really specific situations, there is something you can do about sleep. It's just that it might not be something that you like. You might need to do less doom scrolling at night. You might need to figure out your routine a bit better. You might need to time manage a bit better. You might need to do something new, change that. But the sleep part is going to be super important. So that's the first thing, right? The other part will be stress, just general stress. So if you're already so stressed out at work and with your family life, your work life, everything, all these things will impact your ability to kind of make the kind of progress that you want. But the funny thing about this kind of stress also is that a lot of it comes to mind where it's a lot of mental strengthening or mental reframing that needs to be done. How do you approach stressful situations? How do you manage your emotions and regulate that in those situations? I think this part is like way beyond what the time we have right now to talk about. But it's something that could easily be talked about in depth. Managing stress, right? So is there something you can go to kind of help you reduce stress? And exercise itself is also a great way to just help with reduction of stress in and of itself. Most people actually feel really good after they get in a workout.
Yeah.
Of course, the getting to the workout is the tough part. But once they finish the workout, you feel really good. And that's not just because you accomplished something, you feel good about that, but because there are actual neurological chemical differences that happen when you go and exercise. that helps you to feel good. So that's the other part about the recovery, so to speak, right? So making sure that you manage your stress. Then the last one here, and just as important, even though it's the last one, but it's the nutrition, the nutritional side of things. If I had to distill the nutrition advice into just one sentence, it will be eat more protein. For anybody that's 40 plus, not even just 40 plus, but anybody really that's listening to this that's in Asia, chances are you're not really eating enough protein. And the best way to the best way to tell if somebody's eating enough protein is like if you ask them, eat more protein, and everybody will be saying like, oh yeah, I already eat 2 eggs. In the morning. It's like, yeah, 2 eggs is great, but that's not enough. So yeah, most people are just not eating enough protein. And I don't blame them for the most part, just because, again, lifestyle-wise, socially, the way our meals are usually set up is not protein heavy, especially in Asia, right? A lot of our meals are carb and fat centric. So there's a lot of fried rice, fried noodles, all this kind of stuff. You eat a pancake, you eat I'm just thinking of all the random stuff that happens, right? That pops up, little delicacies and things. So eat more protein, and then that will be the starting point at which you will be able to address the rest in recovery.
Okay. So sleep, manage stress, and eat more protein.
Yeah. If I had to distill it down, right? Because that's the sound bites that we need.
Yeah. Okay. I'm sure we'll do a podcast where we can expand upon this more and in a bigger we'll give a bigger picture as to how rest and recovery really falls and plays a part with regards to your gains or with regards to your weight loss, whichever area that you're at. But I think for today's topic, I think we've covered pretty much everything, huh?
Yeah, I think so. If there's anything else, as always, drop a comment in the podcast at the end, in the podcast box, or you can actually just find us directly at the website. I think the URL is 40plusfit.
Yeah, 40plusfit.com.
Yeah.
Can drop us a note there, or don't forget to give us a follow on our Spotify podcast, or share it with anybody that you feel might benefit from this kind of information.
Yeah.
Other than that, we'll catch you in the next episode.
Yep. See you guys. Thanks for listening.